morning. I will now call this special work session of June 27th, 2023 to order. I'm going to start by reading our Who Are We statement. We are the Polk County Leadership Governance Team. If we were to pick one phrase to define us, it would be student-centered, because when we come together to work, we lean on our diverse backgrounds and experiences to ensure that our decisions are focused on providing a high-quality education for all students. The four most important things to our governance team are operating with integrity, respecting our students, staff, families, and each other, establishing a culture where our stakeholders feel valued, supported, and have opportunities for personal and professional growth, and supporting an approach of continuous improvement to ensure student outcomes. Collectively, we need to work on behalf of the children we serve and find avenues of agreement so that we can govern the district in an effective manner. There is no acceptable alternative. We will always collaborate in a respectful manner in order to enhance opportunities for each student and staff member. We will not disparage others. Our students will thrive because we will remain committed to supporting the whole child. We hope to engage and empower our students and stakeholders to create a community of lifelong learners. And with that, I will turn it over to Superintendent Hyde.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. At this time, the first item will be delayed. We did not receive the final documentation required to submit for a name change or a naming opportunity at Rochelle School of the Arts, so that item will come back to you at the next workshop, so long as all of the required documentation is provided. At this time, I'd like to bring Mr. Jason Pitts, Chief of Staff, forward. He will do the presentation on the 23-24 budget overview, including departmental staffing requests.
First of all, I'd like to thank each of you for making it to this special work session. I know it's very inconvenient when we set the schedule ahead of time and then we add a meeting. But this could take an hour. This could take a couple hours. We're going to go by it point by point and go through it slow, so you can have all the time you need to ask questions.
It's if I could interject for a moment, just to be clear, I know board members may have other conflicting issues and items on their schedule past the posted time. If we don't complete an item, we'll bring it back at the next workshop for completion.
Thank you. Ms. Jenkins and her staff have been working hard to put our budget together. We got off to a late start this year due to the lateness of the legislature approving and the governor approving the budget. But I'm going to ask Ms. Jenkins to come up now and give you your first look at next year's budget.
Good morning. Thank you all again for being here. I know Ms. Dodge gave you a presentation at the last work session going over some of the legislative changes. So what we wanted to do is break it down so that it applies directly to Polk. So every year we do a summary which compares our fourth calculation to our conference report. This year we have gone up, or projected to go up, 5,800 and almost 15 FTE. Down at the bottom, how that breaks out is 2,974 of those are district students, 1,047 are projected to be in charters, and 1,795 are projected to accept the Family Empowerment Scholarship. The BSA has gone up $552.33. At first look, that looks like a lot of money, but as we go through, I'm going to show you some of the ways that we still have to use those funds for mandated activities. The other important factor to note is the district cost differential no longer exists, so now Polk receives a 1.0 factor, which is positive news and very good. The second slide breaks down our different funding pots. So those colored in red are what used to be categoricals that the funds have been transferred to the base student allocation. Purple combines two different things, our turnaround supplemental services and what was formerly known as SAI Supplemental Academic Instruction, which is now called the Educational Enrichment. teal are those that are remaining, and they do remain as categoricals. So as we go through here, the funding compression allocation has been removed this year. It would appear that turnaround supplemental services has been removed, but it is rolled into the educational enrichment. So that's gone up $3,833,916. That would include the amount for turnaround supplemental services, which we're not fully aware of the exact amount at this time, and also supplemental academic instruction based on FTE. Our Safe Schools allocation has gone up a bit. Mental health allocation, most of this is attributed to the increase in FTE. Teacher salary increase allocation has gone up a little over 11 million. In future slides, I'm going to break that down and show you what that means exactly. The reading allocation, teacher classroom supply assistance, and instructional materials have now been rolled into the base funding. Teacher classroom supply assistance are the dollars that we give our teachers to help them buy classroom supplies. Even though there's no separate categorical for that, we're still required to give at least $300 per teacher. Our ESE allocation has gone up. Fun fact, we spend double what we're allocated. So as we were going through, and each year we look at our prior expenses for about the last 4 or 5 years to project where we're going. And it's shocking to see that. But we do spend a lot of dollars. Transportation is also another area that we spend about double what we're funded. So this next slide is a snippet from House Bill 5101, which is the conforming bill, and it references these items that are no longer categorical. So, for example, reading instruction, the funding has been rolled into the BSA, but we are still required to implement a system of comprehensive reading instruction. Mental health, each school district must still implement a school-based mental health assistance program. Instructional materials, we have to report each year what we intend to purchase in instructional materials. Safe schools, all regulations still apply, and our educational enrichment fund is to fund activities and services that support and increase the academic achievement of students in grades kindergarten through 12. So very, very similar to what SAI was.
Ms. Jenkins, if I may, board members, it's incredibly important that Ms. Jenkins actually highlight these issues, because otherwise it could easily lead to the misbelief that there is this larger pot of money available to Polk County Public Schools. These categoricals, while we've been given a great deal of flexibility and latitude with their use, as far as where we can place those dollars, they are still required by statute to be fulfilled. So that's important. Now, this legislative session, there has been discussion, as last legislative session closed, that these categoricals will be revisited to make a determination as to whether or not they will continue to be a required or a mandated area for us to address fully. So again, what that means is, while the dollars look like they've been freed up and put back into the general budget and should be available for other areas, we still have statutory obligations under each one of those areas. Safe Schools is a great example where we will still have considerable expenditures. So again, it's just something we want to bring to your attention and to the attention of our community, because that flexibility is important, though. I will say this, that if we do not spend all of the dollars that have been allocated for a particular categorical area, and that's how we are budgeting for it, can become available to be moved and transferred to provide supports in other areas. So there is far more flexibility now with categorical dollars that may be left over or underutilized, rather than requiring us just to funnel them into that specific program area. And you'll receive more information as we go as to how we are making sure that we are meeting the statutory requirements for each one of those areas, but also if any funds will be moved from one of those areas to cover costs elsewhere, the board will get explicit information that says this is being moved from here to cover this item here. Thank you, Ms. Jenkins.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
As we get further into the presentation, what those areas are?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, because I think that it definitely needs to be highlighted so that we can be aware that it looks like these dollars are freed up, but they really are not.
Correct. Yes, ma'am. And so the budget, I believe, in the budget itself, the line items still contain the traditional allocation assigned to them, but are they highlighted in there, Ms. Jenkins?
I'm going to go back a slide. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
They're further on, but I'll go back some, as to answer Mrs. Field's question. If you look at, the funding compression allocation, the first line, last year we got $6,897,000, and this year that has been completely rolled into the BSA. So it was pretty lenient and pretty flexible as it was, so that one's not as important. More important are the reading allocations. So we got 6.2 million last year. We have no specific allocation, but we still have to provide those services. So what we're doing as the budget team is we are budgeting, we've consulted with the departments that maintain these programs. So we are budgeting at least what we had last year, which we know will be a requirement. So we don't have a specific 6.2, but we've set that aside in the budget. Teacher classroom supply assistance, I have that exact amount further on. It's around the same dollar limit. And instructional materials, we will spend at least 10.6 million. We've consulted with Mr. McNaughton and his team for what we need for those plans. We're also further researching what instructional materials need to be adopted this year and next year, and setting a plan in place so that we can purchase exactly what's needed per year and further utilize those dollars. So that's the first description, and I have more for you. We talked about
Ms. Jenkins, pause
Yes,
for a
sir.
moment. Ms. Miller?
I'm sorry, I didn't know how you wanted us to ask questions. You mentioned earlier, and I just want to make sure that we have an explanation for it for people who are listening, especially staff and school sites. We all know that transportation, how we're funded, and the size of this district just makes it almost impossible, and we run in a deficit from the very beginning. When you talk about we spend double in ESE, there are people that feel in the classroom that we're lacking of services or supports or tangible items. Can you talk about, you don't have to do that now, but I would like someone to give an explanation of the need and how it's, so we can show how it's not funded if there's a need there. Only because it's clear in transportation, but I'm not sure it's clear in the ESC side.
I can give you a high-level explanation, excuse me, and Mrs. Williams could provide further detail, but we spend money on equipment. We have many students that have specific needs in which they require very expensive equipment for the staff to be able to help them through their daily activities. We also have staff. We put forth a concerted effort, and as you'll see later in the staffing presentation, to hire our own employees to serve our ESC population, and oftentimes we're unable to find those employees. So we're forced to go out and use contracted services, which are typically a little bit more expensive. So we're modifying some of our job descriptions and our salary grades and the position types in order to bring more in-house employees. We purchase instructional materials, just as we do for other students. And then we have supplemental services. So our ESE population requires different services that our general ed population does not require.
Thanks for that. I just want to make sure that people that work in that realm understand the matrix scores and how much dollars go to a student, and can walk into a classroom and sometimes challenge if that $21,000 is sitting with that student, because when they pass legislation, they talk about dollars following students. So I think we need to do a better job of explaining how that works. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Fields?
Superintendent Howard was wondering, as we are discussing the variances and how we got monies this past year, but we're not going to be getting specifically monies this year, is there any way for us to have footnotes that would have a very brief definition or summarization of that, as I'm saying later for us?
Yes, ma'am.
Because it's nice for us to verbally hear it, but it would be very good if it was on the document as a footnote. You know, we received compression allocations last year, but this year we're not. And those dollars are being funneled in another area, something like that.
Mr. Pitts, was that addressed in the executive summary? I don't recall. Yes, sir. Well, to Ms. Fields' question, specifically about any changes.
It's not as clear.
Okay. Then Ms. Fields,
Fields is asking for, and we will definitely provide, I hate referring to it as a cheat sheet, but something that you have in hand, and as you talk to other folks, you've got the footnotes that will.
we'll provide the crosswalk, Ms. Fields.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Okay, so on our current slide, our teacher salary increase allocation, if you see the fifth one down, this is the one I talked about, we have $11.1 million increase this year. If you look at the first column, that's the fourth calculation, and that is what we received last year. The second column is the conference report, and it is what we are receiving until we receive our second calculation, which comes July 19th. And if you look at the bottom, they're color-coded. Red was transferred into our base FEFP. Purple was transferred into our educational enrichment allocation. And teal are our remaining categoricals. As Mr. Pitt stated, I'll write that up in a Word document so that it's summarized. And then at the very right is our variance column that shows you the difference. So I'm going to go forward a couple slides, and we're going to talk about our teacher, these are the funds that are provided to increase our base teacher salary to $47,500. Polk has already reached that. So each school district and charter, I've highlighted the key points, shall use 1.41% of its base FEFP funding to reach $47,500. Since we have already done that, we are using that funding to maintain. So the amount we receive is based on, it's 33, I'll go forward a little bit. It's 31 million, 31.1 million. I'm sorry, I did it backwards. So 4.52 is for maintaining and 1.41 is for increasing. So we can provide increases to address compression for all classroom teachers. So we're working currently with PEA to provide a plan for the 9.7 million, and that will address, mainly address compression. The $31 million amount is different than what we ended our year with last year, but it's based on our teacher roster that we submit to DOE. So we submit reporting that tells them exactly the dollars that we use to get our teachers up to the 47.5. So that's where that figure comes from.
Board members, an additional point of clarification, that those dollars that Ms. Jenkins has referred to that are currently in discussion with PEA, that's step one of addressing compression. We do not have enough financial resources at our disposal to fully address compression across the board. So it will take multiple years to address this. So what you're seeing is, and what we will provide employees and what's being currently negotiated with PEA, is what that multi-tiered approach will look like over multiple years so that we can gradually address those issues with compression over time. Ms. Fields.
Amount that's needed in order for us to be able to address wholeheartedly the compression, the teacher compression? Do we know what that would look like if we had a wish list and we were blessed to get it? Do we know what that would look like?
We do not, because part of that conversation is what exactly does the compression adjustment need to reflect? For example, between an employee, we used to have step and lane, and that's no longer allowed, is my understanding. And so part of the issue for us isn't just based off years of service, it's based off of what's the disparity between employees. And so if we were to take, for example, the increases that we added to the base teacher salary, to start with one option, if I can explain for a moment. One option could be look at how much did our base teacher allocation move, and is the expectation that we then increase everyone else's salary by that same amount. And so if that's one option, that can be priced out. Right now, we're still in discussions with PEA about what that compression will look like and how it's to be addressed. But I believe that that would be one of the fairest ways to approach it. And we'd have to run the numbers and come up with the finances on the final number, what that would look like.
Are we also looking at whether or not that would be retro, that would be effective in July 1? Are we looking at that as well?
So for anything that we move, we expect to have salaries finalized before the start of the school year. So there shouldn't be any need for, well, let me rephrase that. There will be some retro because lessons learned, we've got to give payroll enough time to adequately load and prepare the software to make sure that we're paying all of our employees appropriately. So we may have at least a month, maybe 2 months of retro in this school year, depending on when we finalize negotiations with PEA and when the board approves that negotiation. But yes, ma'am, it would include retro. Any retro that we negotiate, any payroll that we negotiate past the first day of school would be retroactive back to the July 1st date. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
On the next slide, the next important piece to note is the Family Empowerment Scholarship. In the fourth calculation, our funding was $57.7 million. For the conference report, it's estimated to be $69.7. That's with the 1,700 increase in students. It's a little over 6,000. We're not 100% sure if that projection is correct. We did budget conservatively. It's an additional $12 million. On a positive note, the legislature has set aside $300 million for increase in FTE statewide to avoid a proration. And what a proration is we have one pot of money that all the school districts are funded from, and if you have an increase in students statewide, then that pot is divided up amongst the new number. If you have a decrease in half the state and an increase in the other half of the state, that means you may be able to maintain the same amount per student. However, if you have an increase overall, your amount per student would decrease. What the extra pot of money is to ensure that that amount per student should not decrease this year. We also receive a state-funded discretionary supplement, so that's the first piece of it you'll see. If you notice, our increase in the Family Empowerment Scholarship was $12 million, and the discretionary supplement is about $12.1, which offsets that to some degree. Our taxable value this year has gone up. I don't have last year's on here. You'll see that in the budget, but it's about 17%. For our school taxable value over last year. We don't know the official millage rate yet. We'll know that July 19th, and we'll bring that to you with the tentative budget. And the overall picture is there is an $83 million increase in K through 12 funding over last year, keeping in mind the things that we discussed about our categoricals that we still have to spend, and we will break that down for you in following slides. So this is the preliminary general fund budget projection worksheet that we bring to you every year. Last year, our 22-23 revenue was $956 million for general fund FEFP. Our 23-24 new revenue over that amount is $83.7 million. From that, we have to take out the charter school percentage, which is around 16%. That's $13.5 million. Our new general fund net revenue, less charter schools, is then $70 million. Total available 23-24 revenue, which includes net revenue and fund balance from the prior year, will be almost $1.2 billion.
Dr. Allen?
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins, on that. I was looking for a comparison from last year's budget book. So last year's budget book was $1.1 billion on the general fund. So what is that number for a general fund on this coming? Now, collectively, our budget was $2.3 billion, right?
Close to
last year.
2.4. Yes, sir.
So where we, obviously you mentioned that we're still waiting on a couple, but projection-wise, collectively, the budget as a whole from $2.3 billion last year to what this next year?
Dr. Allen, we're still compiling that piece. I could guess at it, but we don't know our official funding until we receive the second calculation, which is around July 19th. So we're starting to compose the different pieces. A lot of the grants, we also don't know our final amount until closer to the final budget, and some yet even after that point. So it will be an increase over the prior year, but I can't tell you exactly how much at this given point.
Okay. And then, but I would assume that we can, I can get the final number on what the general fund number is. So from the budget book, it was 1.1 billion, right? As far as the general fund, it was 50%. What is it currently, like the bottom number?
It's almost 1.2.
Okay.
So from the budget book, we will bring you the tentative budget on July 25th, and that includes an estimate of our general fund grants. There are other pieces that make up the general fund other than the FEFP. We have Medicaid, and then we have general fund grants, and then a few other small taxable items. So we'll bring you that in July, and then in September, we'll bring you the total finalized completed amount.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins.
You're welcome. So for 23-24, new items. For new teachers, we have, so if we look back, our district increase in FTE is about 2,974. So we think we're going to go up almost 3,000 FTE. For that, just the teachers would be the amount that would, for example, staff Haines City. So to cover for the new FTE, we are setting aside $9.2 million. In workers' compensation, the amount needed to cover our workers' compensation claims based on an analysis and our district type of employees is $3.5 million. We brought to you in an earlier workshop our learning support and ESE positions that were transferred to the general fund. That is $3 million. Superintendent Hyde also sent an email out to you all regarding Medicaid billing. So some of the positions that we have had in federal funds can and should be coded to general funds because they are eligible for Medicaid services and Medicaid billing. That is what this dollar amount represents. Information technology reorg to support one-to-one, $189,000. That was brought to you on the workshop May 28th, 2023. District level reorg and staffing will be $2.4 million. That's what Mr. Pitts will present as soon as I'm finished. School operating increases for growth, $300,000 at a very basic minimum that covers utilities, water, electric, basic operating costs. Teacher classroom supply assistance. This is the amount that we have to allocate at least $300 per teacher. Last year we paid 6,500 teachers for teacher lead. That totals $1,950,000. Our property insurance has gone up statewide, not only for homeowners but also for the school district. So that increases $1.6 million over the amount we paid last year. Categorical cost. Those are the categoricals that we've been discussing, for example, instructional materials, reading allocation. The amount of funded mandates that we still have to cover that are no longer listed as a categorical is a little over $32 million. So I'll include that in the summary that we prepare for you all. Our FRS rate increase is $9 million. So FRS has gone up a little, almost 2%. New positions, 22-23 new positions added during the year. So as we go along throughout our year, if a school determines they need an extra teaching allocation or we need a guidance counselor or custodians, any position that is added from the point that we approve the final budget, those are included in the $10 million amount. So we have to, since it wasn't included in our budget last year, we have to include it as a projected cost for this year because it is in the current staffing plan. And then finally, we have potential 2023 increases. We've set aside $9 million in addition to the TSA funding for teachers to address compression district-wide. Our current plan is to divide that up per employee group. And then our health insurance plan, in order to maintain liquidity and a positive fund balance, we will have to increase the board contribution this year another $100 per member per month, which totals $13.7 million. Had we not had to include this to support our health insurance fund, if we're able to make plan changes going forward, then that pot of money could have been contributed to addressing compression. It all comes from the same place. Yes, ma'am.
Hang on. Ms. Fields was first?
Can you go back to that slide? Thank you. So, Superintendent Hart, thank you for getting the Medicaid information. I didn't get it until yesterday, so I haven't had time to view it. So I wanted you to go back and make the statement that you made about the learning support ESE positions transferred to general funds, and you referenced Medicaid. And then I wanted to know, do we have a list of the new positions that were added 22, 23, and the potential 2023, 24 increases? If you could define that for me, are you saying that those dollars are specifically for the compression for the teachers? Because I just want to make sure I'm understanding, because it was not very clear to me.
Let me go through those one by one.
Yes, ma'am.
So learning support ESE positions that we're transferring to the general fund. IDEA is a federal grant, so most of these positions were paid for out of IDEA, and they serve Medicaid-eligible students, which means we're able to apply for Medicaid reimbursement, which is another federal source. So if you pay those positions from IDEA, a federal grant, then it's no longer eligible to seek reimbursement from Medicaid. The reason that we're switching them to the general fund is to further utilize our IDEA dollars to cover other positions, and then we'll be able to submit for reimbursement through Medicaid. Any questions on that one? Or does
But
that?
it's the same question, the same comment that I would make earlier. It would be nice to have footnotes somewhere to explain this, for me,
Yes, ma'am.
anyway.
We'll
Okay.
put together
Yes,
something.
ma'am. Thank you.
And then your next question was new positions added during the year. Yes, for further clarification, we can get you a list of that. On a broader picture, there is a $39 million increase from the tentative budget last year to the amount we're budgeting this year. Of that, $29 million was budgeted for increases because we completed negotiations prior to the final budget being printed. And then the remaining $10 million are those positions we added throughout the year. And I will get that for you. Potential 23-24 increases. No, ma'am, that does not just address teachers. What we've done is, I'll show you 2 slides from now, our projected ending fund balance. So we calculated the amount we had over what we needed to maintain our board policy of 5% for our fund balance. And then we're setting that aside. And we've divided it by employees. We have around 13,000 employees. So what we did is we split it up per employee group, and then we're having discussions with the unions with both PEA, and we have AFSCME negotiations coming up, so that with those groups we can decide how to utilize these funds to support either compression or salary enhancement, whatever's negotiated.
Thank you.
That-
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Miller?
Thank you. That also kind of goes along with my question. Thanks, Ms. Fields, for asking that. But when we put the health insurance plan and we referenced these dollars could be used to, if we change the plan, they would be used to help compression. I'd like to see that, like what those dollars, how much that would help relieve that compression, because that was a quick, if you guys would just get off the plan, we could help give people more money is what people are going to hear. And so I would like, an apples to apples, if that money was released, what it would look like.
It's not, you guys. Health insurance is a very complicated project.
Right.
And there are a lot of different things we can look at doing, and we do have some committees set up, and thanks to a couple of you who volunteered to work on those committees, we have to take a step to look at what works best for our district and our population and how we can best save dollars and put those back into our folks.
Thanks. I just don't want the message to be, change the plan and look, we'll fix compression. And so if we could have that comparison, that would be great.
Absolutely.
So, but it's important to look at other factors as well. So if we're going to do that for insurance, we're going to do it for substitute costs, we're going to do it for all other costs. Because I think what people lose in the overall picture is where we are spending our dollars that otherwise could be free in the general allocation to provide increases. This board has historically been committed to covering all insurance costs because we were not providing commensurate raises, and it doesn't make sense to pass the cost on to employees that say it's $100 a month, and yet they're getting a $25 a month raise. So I understand, appreciate, and respect the board's position on that. And if you recall from our last meeting where we reviewed the insurance, we brought the consultant in, I committed to you, I will not bring this back to you this way again. We will not have these costs. We will have a solution or some options to explore and begin to implement, because over just the last 2 years, we've spent over $20 million subsidizing our insurance policy. And that's a good thing for our employees. I don't want anybody, to Ms. Miller's point, I don't want anybody walking away or hearing that we're eliminating insurance for our employees. That's not what we're talking about. But our costs right now are not where they need to be. And as a large organization, as a large employer, we should have better bargaining power and more leverage. And that's why we are talking to other counties. As we shared in the last meeting about insurance, Osceola completely restructured their plan and has already realized significant savings. And so we're looking at that group and the consulting group that they brought in, and we're looking at all options. But it's important to note that this is where our dollars are spent. The same is true with substitute services. When you spend several $1 million a year on substitutes, what people don't realize is that comes out of the general budget. And so we've tried and have put some strategies in place to address chronic absenteeism. Not just, employees earn their time. If they're ill, if their child's ill, if a family member's ill, we want them to take that time. There's nothing wrong with that. We're talking, and we're more focused on that employee who takes a day off every week, every Friday, every Monday. And we're having conversations with those employees to say, what's going on? Because if there's a real issue at home, let's say they have their significant other or a parent or someone else who receives services in their home, but they can't afford a caregiver for that extra day, so they then turn have to be home. We want to know that to the extent that we can, so we can accommodate for that. But in the absence of that, we need to have a different conversation to say, we can't have you working a 4-day work week. Our students suffer as a result of that. And it increases our overall operating costs, and it places additional burden on the rest of the staff. You know, there's something that I'm going to put out to our schools here in the very near future that basically is going to say ESE staff are no longer available to cover classrooms. They cannot be pulled from providing services to students because we are now losing so much instructional or so much support time that we're ending up having to pay additional dollars for compensatory services after the fact for the same employees who should be able to provide the services during the day while students are there. And so it's those additional costs, I think, that need to be highlighted. So if we're going to do this for insurance, we're going to come up with a comprehensive list, and Ms. Fields will provide an explanation behind each one, and the rest of the board will provide a comprehensive explanation, because these are additional costs that people don't look at, and they just assume at times, especially, and we are in a very good place right now with our bargaining units, but at times it leads to conflict because their perception is, well, all this money is available, but it's not, because you're spending it elsewhere. And so it's basically like, it's like your checking account. If you have all these bills to pay, after you pay them all, this is all that's left to play with. And so we need to do a very good job of being transparent in this area. So Ms. Jenkins will provide that analysis, but we definitely need to highlight all those other areas as well. That's important.
It's ironic you mentioned substitutes because our cost this year was a little over $14 million.
So that right there, almost $28 million between substitute costs and health insurance alone. It's not, but like I said, we're going to break out all those costs because that doesn't typically get discussed, but we'd be happy to provide that summary, Ms. Fields, in the follow-up documentation.
Absolutely.
Ms. Fields.
We've been dealing with health insurance issues for a long time, a minute. And I think that at the end of the day, we all value the need for everyone to have insurance coverage. There's no question about that. I think one of the things that we have talked about, but we have been very slowful to do anything about, is looking at some options and understanding that everyone might have to pay a few dollars, or they might get a lesser plan. I don't know what the answer is, but I think that at the end of the day, it's good to have all this information where it is transparent and everyone understands where we are and where we're trying to go, because we can't keep putting money into a dark hole.
Correct. Dollars that would be better served, serving our students and our staff, quite frankly.
Correct.
And I think that's what people miss. Again, like I said, this is that hidden number that comes out of the budget that everybody doesn't realize that we're actually spending it on our employees. And many people don't realize that this is in addition to their pay raise. So
Benefit.
even now when we're in negotiations, I've asked the team to make sure that when we talk about how many dollars we're bringing to the table for pay raises, that we're including this number. Because this is a raise for our employees, because we're covering their costs. And I think that's important. And that commitment on behalf of the board is important for us to continue to fulfill. But we need to find a better policy and a better strategy moving forward.
Correct.
Because we can't keep having our costs increase the way they have been increasing.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
The final slide, our total 23-24 expenses that we have just looked at are 96 million. Our budgeted expenses for 22-23 are $1 million. Yes. And then our 23-24 expense budget is $1,086,000. Taking all that into consideration, that'll leave us with a ending fund balance of about $65 million. From that, you take out 17.7 for categoricals, the remaining categoricals, because those are restricted to specific uses, leaving 47.9 million, which translates to a 5.18% fund balance, budgeted ending fund balance. Typically, in any given year, we have approximately $15 million in lapse. Those are dollars from unfilled positions, salaries, and benefits, which leads our projected final ending fund balance to about 6.8. What that means is we're budgeting 5%. We could end up with as much as 6.8%. 5 is your board policy. Any?
Superintendent Hyde, I think.
You are.
So I have always been very vocal about using lapse as a means of saying that we have that as a part of our fund balance. I understand that. And so for me, I'm looking at our ending fund balance, estimating at 5.18%. So I just want to make sure that we've had this discussion before. How can you realistically include lapse when you don't even know what positions are going to be not filled at the end of the year? This is just anticipated monies that we might save. So I just want to make sure that, for me, 5.18% is what we're looking at, not the 6.80%.
Ms. Jenkins, do you want to address some of that?
We agree with you, Mrs. Fields. 5.18 is the projected ending fund balance. However, the reason that we include the anticipated lapse and then the final projected number is oftentimes we don't want it to come as a shock to the board if our fund balance continues to grow. And as we go through the year, we will provide information to you that says we have this amount of vacancies. This is our current projected ending fund balance. This is how we're going along. We're not, we agree with you, that should not be counted as our projected fund balance. We just want to be transparent and let you know that those are things that could affect it based on the last several years.
I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am. Anything else?
There are no further questions, Mr. Oh. Hang on, Dr. Allen, let me turn your mic on.
Just for the record, to restate.
Go ahead, Dr. Allen.
Okay, just for the record, restate the budgeted expense and the new expense budget. I think it was stated million.
Billion.
Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Allen.
I think he asked you to restate it.
Oh, restate.
Yeah, please.
96,276,799. Our 22-23 budgeted expense, 1,922,745. And our new fiscal year 23-24 expense budget would be 1,086,427,778.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins.
You're welcome.
Mr. Pitts?
So on your desk in front of you are 3 documents that we printed off. One's this entire presentation. But what goes into the staffing part of this is an executive summary, which is just verbal descriptions of what you're going to see on that spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is a little complicated because you'll see things like fund and unfund, when sometimes that's a position upgrade, but it shows that so it's a little confusing. So then I put it all together in this presentation. So you should be able just to use the presentation to follow along and not have to go back and forth between documents. So it was up until just Wednesday that we were able to finalize this presentation for you. Since December, we've been collecting information from departments about their needs for a district reorg, but we always have to wait to see what our final budget's going to be. This year, we had learning support come to you in February because they had a significant change in their org structure. We had in March information technology, and Ms. Pasco brought forward the changes that would need to be made in our organization to support the one-to-one rollout. And then the rest of the district reorg is what we're going to discuss today. What we try to do in the district reorg is maintain fairness and to have a well-balanced approach to our positions in the district office. Now, some increases to positions are based on increased volume and responsibility, and we want to create parity across the organization. New positions primarily arise from growth and workload. This is a significant district reorg that we haven't seen quite this significant in years. Part of that is the new revenue that we're receiving, but we've really, and this came out during the efficiency audit that we recently completed, not only do our positions rank very low compared to other school districts, our district staff, the number of district staff is also low, the number of those staff compared to other districts. So this year is an opportunity to try to start getting that support that's needed at the district office that we have not over the last few years. So looking back at the past 3 years and going into this year, we've increased students by 19,000 extra students, which is an 18% increase. And if you go back to the past 13 years, that's when the recession started, we've grown over 30,000 students, or a 34% increase. swipe it. Okay. So the first departments that want to present is Public Relations and Strategic Partnerships, and also the Polk Education Foundation. One of the changes that we're suggesting is to move the Office of Equity and Diversity directly under the Superintendent from Human Resources. Polk Education Foundation is in need of a analyst position, just primarily to keep up with all the financial aspects of scholarships and trust and estates, and they will be funding, or they will be providing reimbursement to the district. So that is at no cost to our general fund. Also, in the Public Relations and Strategic Partnerships, let me stop and say that I'm going to try to get through most of this as I can, but the departments are here if there are more specific questions, and we'll have those leaders come up if I'm not able to answer the specific questions.
Yeah, as we have been.
Good. Sidebar.
Ms. Miller?
I didn't know how you wanted questions at the end or.
We'll do them as we go.
Okay. I just want to say first, I appreciate this, that the Office of Diversity is moving back to the superintendent's office. It was like that at one time, and I think it's much more effective. I think we've heard in the past how well it worked, and in most districts, it's any office, any organization, that office is working right with the CEO because of the need. So I think that's a pleasant, I was happy to see that. You mentioned PEF. PEF does a lot of work with very little staff, and I think it's important to have that position with us because we want to continue the message to the donors that every dollar that they're giving goes to students and not overhead. So I think I'm super excited about your changes, Jason.
Well, thank you. You explained it much better than I did for PEF, and so thank you for those.
Well, I sit on that board, but I've watched that board, and a lot of the board members that have been around for a while have told us we don't know how that office produces what they do with that small staff. So I'm hoping this helps and they can generate more dollars for students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Fields?
I had a question on the process of the leadership team coming and making their requests known. What is the process? How does that work? How do you all determine whether or not a new position is needed? And here, you haven't gotten to it yet, but you talk about a revised job description for the senior coordinator of special events. Will we see the job descriptions?
You will. You'll actually get those job descriptions here in the next week or so. One of the issues was just the way that some of those job descriptions, not only the job descriptions, but the picture aspect of what the org chart looks like. Since we didn't finalize most of this until Wednesday, there wasn't really an opportunity to fix the picture part of the org chart, which actually helps you read along. But in this year in December, we sent out to all of our departments. That's the time to start submitting requests for the next year. As those requests start coming in, the senior manager, senior leader over that department vets what they would like to see go forward. And then in the very end, it's at the cabinet level, the superintendent, Ms. Jenkins, Mr. Green, Mr. Warren, and myself are primarily the ones that say yes or no on what's going to go forward and be presented to the school board.
Thank you.
Okay. So you mentioned the revised senior coordinator job to senior coordinator special events, recognitions, and volunteering. If you remember back, Marissa Green was part of that department and switched over to human resources, and so we are revising that job description back to make sure that we're including special events, recognitions, and volunteering. So you will see that revised job description here in the next week or two. And the one upgrade in this department is from a Secretary 3 to an office manager. So currently, our receptionists that sit out front have reported to Jeanette Crowley, which I'm not sure that has made sense. Nothing against Jeanette in any way. But Secretary 3 now is going to take on the responsibility of managing the receptionist out front, and that's the reason for that upgrade. So in all, those represent just an addition, one total addition of one position in net. The cost of the general fund would be $34,000, and then the cost from PEF that won't go to general fund is $66,382. Any other comments or questions before I move on to the next? No?
Seeing none?
Okay, thank you. Next is our Career, Technical, Adult, and Multiple Pathways Education Department. One of the primary changes is that division is going to move from underneath the Chief Academic Officer to the Chief of High Schools, which that's a name change for one of our positions you're going to see in the next slide. So it's a change on the org structure. And their request for next year is to upgrade 3 of their curriculum specialists of CTE to assistant directors. And those assistant directors are an assistant director of agriculture, an assistant director of human services and resources, assistant director of business, and marketing management. They're also requesting an upgrade of a Secretary 3 to a specialist of student assignment, upgrade an FTE analyst to a coordinator of CTAE reporting, then to add 3 more assistant directors. Those would be an assistant director of industrial manufacturing engineering, health science, and then 1 for communication and information services. Along with those additional positions is the need to fund another secretary in that department. They'll also be unfunding a position called Associate Tech and IT Data. All of those changes are to the general fund. It's a net of 3 additional positions for a cost of $406,000.
Mr. Pitts, if I may, board members, just a point of clarification. This is because in Career Tech Ed and for our academies programs, we have not had a structure that allows for better support, better response, and in many instances, more accountability. We've had programs that have truly flourished and programs that have not, and some programs that just haven't gotten much attention because there aren't specific individuals who oversee those areas. And so what I asked for Career Tech Ed to do was to identify 6 specific career umbrella areas, and that's what they came up with. This was done previously, and asked them to realign all of their supports. There are also several other positions that are being unfunded here because we have eliminated 4 or 5 of the, I can't remember the term for the.
Well, the curriculum specialist positions are going away. That would become assistant director. And then we have an analyst that we're getting rid of, an FTE analyst. Let me say, those positions are not an actual body of a person going away. So I don't want anyone to think that they're losing their job. Right. And to unfund an associate tech of IT data.
So these individuals will basically have the responsibility of providing curriculum support in other areas, but also, more importantly, taking greater ownership and working with schools to continue to grow and enhance their programs. As you know, this was the first year, the 22-23 school year, that we've ever put an accountability structure in place for our academy model programs and our career tech ed programs by virtue of the academic improvement plan or academy improvement plans, where they had to look at their historical data, identify their enrollment, identify continued participation rates, and more importantly, passing rates, completion rates. But they also broke it out by demographic subgroups so we could make sure that our programs are providing equitable access to all of our students. And so after this first year of data, again, this was phase 2 of realigning that department so that it made more sense, and it actually falls better in alignment with other national models for how to support the academy programs. This puts them by the assistant director position. It does give them more accountability and more opportunity to work with administrators. They will actually contribute to the evaluation of our school-based administrators in each one of these program areas, which is important because that feedback has to be provided so that we're, again, creating that sense of accountability and commitment to our academy's flourishing and, more importantly, to student outcomes. Dr. Allen?
Definitely wanted to say thank you on this one and some of the maneuvering here to really strengthen the operational standpoint. I would love to be able to find access to those academy improvement plans. I know we can track the school improvement plans online and so forth. I'm not sure where I can find those. I was a little concerned on the naming conventions. I mean, obviously, we'll see the job descriptions come forward. So maybe to hear a little bit of rationale of like where, you know, you mentioned the clusters that were targeted specifically, but I just want to make sure that we don't undermine or devalue the advancements that we've made thus far in aerospace initiatives. And then on top of that, just some of our high skill areas. And then, you know, where would we place, like, say, the cybersecurity initiative that's moving forward as well from an academy standpoint? So if we're looking at those categories, you've got the communication and information services. I would assume that's where maybe they're thinking that they would place the aerospace and some of the cybersecurity. Would just love to hear a little bit more of that. I do see, like, say, for example, communication, that could coincide more with the marketing management standpoint. So I don't know, I would like to see a little bit stronger alignment with the Florida's targeted industries and the occupations, and just so that we don't undermine some of the movement that we've made specifically within aerospace and some of those high-skill, high-wage areas.
So to be clear, CFAA and its commensurate program in Winter Haven will go under industrial marketing and engineering, and anything having to deal with IT network and network security will go under information services and communication. Again, in our attempt to create 6 global umbrellas, it's going to be increasingly difficult to capture specifically every area. So since aerospace does fall under engineering, we placed it there. And information services, again, would be the network IT security and anything related to computer tech or information tech. But what we can do, Dr. Allen, is take these 6 areas and align each one of our, in which they have done, and align each one of our commensurate academy programs under them so you know where each one falls and each one lies. But if you'd like us to revisit these designations, we'd be happy to make sure that they are reflective of all of our academy programs. So, Ms. Fields?
Okay, I had a couple of questions here. I wanted to know on the unfunding of positions and funding of positions. Are these new positions primarily going to be filled by existing staff? Will these positions be advertised to open it up to anyone that might qualify? And then my same question is job descriptions. Are we going to be getting, maybe they already exist, I don't believe that they do for the new positions. Are we going to be getting job descriptions for those? And my last question, I know I'm asking quite a bit, and my last question is, the total estimated with the changes is 406,466. What is it currently if we did not have these upgrades or new positions? And if you don't have the answer right now, that's fine. You can provide it to me later.
So I do have most of the answers off the top of my head.
Okay?
So 3 of our curriculum specialists will be upgraded to assistant directors. The cost on that varies depending on where their salary currently is, but it's going to be on salary $5,000 to $7,000 for each of those curriculum specialists being upgraded to assistant directors. Now, the 3 additional assistant directors, those are brand-new positions and will be advertised.
Okay.
One of the positions that I mentioned was an upgrade from a secretary 3 to a specialist. That is an upgrade, and it's filled. It's currently filled, and then the upgrade to there's an upgrade to an FTE analyst to a coordinator of reporting, and that is currently filled and would be an upgrade. And those last 2 positions that I mentioned would be $3,000 to $4,000 in additional salary. You will see the brand new job descriptions that will discuss what Dr. Allen just brought up, that will clearly define what falls underneath those assistant directors. Now, you had another question that I did not.
What if we did not add the new positions and didn't do the upgrade, what is the current amount versus the estimated new amount?
It would be 0.
Well, there's three new,
Upgrade.
in total, there's 3 new positions, and those new positions are about $330,000. So it would be less than $100,000 for those other 3 positions that we're adding.
Where we currently are.
Yes.
Well, wait a second. I want to make sure we clarify that question because I don't think that's what she asked.
What I'm asking is this, let me be clear.
Please.
Excluding the new positions and the people that are in the current positions, if we didn't do anything but just kept things as they are now, what is that cost versus what the estimated new cost is going to be?
So if I'm understanding the question correctly, the way you just said it, if everything remains status quo, the cost would be 0.
But we
Or are you
have
asking
a
what the department
curriculum
overall-
specialist, correct?
But those positions already exist, so
But
that,
but there's still costs, and I'm just asking, what is that cost?
so you're asking for the cost of the current budget?
Yeah,
Okay, for that department.
I'm sure that somebody could get that information for
and I don't need it right this minute, but I'm just saying, if I'm gonna be looking at some type of increase, I wanna know what we're currently doing. And maybe I wasn't clear, but that's what I wanna know. What are we currently doing versus what we're proposing to do?
Understood.
Okay,
I did misunderstand it.
no problem, and you don't have to give that to me right this minute.
We'll
Okay.
get it ASAP.
Thank you.
Any other questions in that area before we move on?
No, sir.
Okay. So the next department is the Deputy Superintendent's office. There's a lot of verbiage here, but essentially what is going on.
Mr. Pitts, if we could pause for a moment. I asked that Mr. Cochran report to the boardroom because part of this too, for clarification, Mr. Cochran, please come down to the microphone, to provide additional clarification for the board. With the career tech ed positions, the reason why it reflects an additional cost is that because we are elevating the TRST positions, which are the curriculum specialist positions, they can no longer be funded by Perkins. And so while, yes, there is an overall increase to the budget, the Perkins dollars now become available in the general budget. Is that not accurate, Mr. Cochran?
That is correct.
Okay. And so there is an offset here. That's the important part I wanted to point out, is that, again, because they're being elevated to a managerial position, they're not eligible to be funded through Perkins dollars. So all of that funding that's currently funding those positions comes back to the budget and offsets or provides additional revenue to provide supports for our programs at the school level and for additional staff. So I just wanted to make sure that Mr. Cochran affirmed that this morning, and we'll provide you with that analysis as well, because I think it's important that you see that, because it's being traditionally right now, much of the costs within that department are being offset. Last year, you'll recall that we adjusted the TRST positions because some TRST positions were 12 months, some were 11 months, some were 10 months. And so we rectified that during the reorg and restructuring last school year when we evaluated all of the positions. But the TRST positions are not sufficient to adequately supervise each one of these areas. We needed the assistant director's positions. And so this creates, in my opinion, and my recommendation, obviously in working with the team, it creates a better system and structure to provide supports for our programs and our expanding program model moving forward. I see Ms. Fields.
On that, because you know that, but we don't.
Correct.
Yeah,
But that's why I wanted,
Yeah.
I wanted Mr. Cochran here to say no if I was wrong, but that was my recollection of our conversation.
No, sir, you're exactly correct. And just let me expand on that a little bit more, is we've been utilizing more of our grant money to fund existing positions as possible, thus taking them out of the general fund and leaving more of the general fund. We did that with our adult ed grants, which are separate from our Perkins. But this will, even though we are not able to fund the assistant director positions out of Perkins, we will utilize that money to fund either existing positions or future positions at schools, so that will again alleviate money from the general budget. So it will, I cannot say that it's a complete wash, but the look that we are expending more is not quite the truth, in that some of that money will come back to the general fund by us funding other positions with the Perkins.
and I think that needs a footnote.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you. I just had one question while we're on the CTE. So historically, we've had curriculum specialists, and then we've also had the community relations business partner specialists, but the curriculum specialist did curriculum while the business partner specialist did based on regions. Are we able to align those so that the business partner so that our business partners that are coming in have one contact when they're talking to people, or will they still have, if I want to work in Lakeland, I have one contact. If I want to work in Winter Haven, I have a different contact, even though it's the same industry?
We have actually, starting last year, when we started to bring the business and industry specialists, the community liaisons in to help with us with the school showcase, we've been working on building that structure so that our local business and community partners will have one point of contact, and that person will act as a point of contact and then bring them into the workforce office or area. And we still have a senior coordinator who is our community and internship specialist, and that's the point of contact for the community liaisons. So we are working with them to make that clear, so we're not actually out there competing for the same business partners or not having a consistent message. We are really leaning on the community liaisons for that, being that initial contact.
Okay. But as far as once they get into the system, if they're wanting to support schools on multiple campuses, they have a different contact for those schools?
No.
Okay.
No. When the community liaisons connect us with business and industry partners, those are to support the academies. But the community liaisons will do more in the middle school and the elementary, things that we're not necessarily associated with. So they have sort of two paths. One path where they are supporting our academies, and one path where they are supporting the schools that don't have academies but still, seeking community support.
Right. I understand what the community liaisons do. My question is, if we have a construction company that wants to be involved in multiple construction academies, one is in the South region, one is in the Northwest region, one's in the Northeast region, are they working with 3 different community liaisons to be able to work with us? Or do they have one contact person in academies?
Ideally, the community liaisons would bring them to our department, and yes, they would have one contact for academies.
Would that be now this assistant director position?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
The only addition or asterisk to that, Ms. Wyatt, because again, having heard frequent concerns about how to connect and how to support programs from the community, has also been, in part of the reorg, you'll see now 2 liaisons for job assignments and internships and externships, because again, that work was probably too much for one individual, so we restructured that area as well. Ultimately, the assistant director, and that's the purpose behind elevating them, they are the ultimate and final person responsible for that area beyond Mr. Cochran, and then ultimately back to my office and Tracy Collins as the high school person. But it's important for us to create and streamline that communication process, because that is frustrating for a construction program or multiple businesses.
Number one complaint I get.
Absolutely. So all of that's been streamlined. So those community liaisons will funnel that information to the assistant director, who then will become the primary for that program area, or any programs, any of the academies listed under their general title will be their responsibility.
Thank you. And then my last question was, if it is falling under high schools, does that mean our middle school and elementary school CTE programs are not funneling through academies?
No.
Okay. Where will those fall under?
Go ahead, Mr. Cochran.
We will still, even though in the organization who I will directly answer to will be the chief of high schools, however, we've already discussed, we are still supporting the academies at the middle school level and developing those academies at the elementary level. So that's just one of our tasks underneath the chief of high schools.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Cochran. I don't see any further questions.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Right now, we'll move on to the Deputy Superintendent's office. We are moving away from having a regional assistant superintendent over elementary, for instance, to a more of a regional approach. So the title change for Regional Assistant Superintendent of School Improvement to Regional Assistant Superintendent Central Region, and that will be Chris Roberts. Title change, Regional Assistant Superintendent Elementary to Regional Assistant Superintendent South Region, that's Beth Dave. Title change from Regional Assistant Superintendent Elementary to Regional Assistant Superintendent of the Northwest Region is Dr. Henry. Title change for Regional Assistant Superintendent of High Schools to Chief of High Schools, and that is Ms. Tracy Collins. Title change from Regional Assistant Superintendent of Middle Schools to Regional Assistant Superintendent of the Northeast Region, Rebecca Rawlerson. So underneath those assistant superintendents, they have senior directors that support them. So we'll have some name changes, structure changes here. Title change from Senior Director of School Improvement to Senior Director of Central and South Region. That's Matt Campisi. Title change of Senior Director of School Improvement to Senior Director of Northwest and Northeast Regions. That's Humani Berrien. Title change of 4 Senior Directors to Senior Directors of now the Polk Transformation Office. So those are the structure changes, name changes for that group. The 2 positions we are requesting to add is the Senior Director of High Schools, and then an additional secretary to support that Senior Director of High Schools. So cost-wise to the general fund for those two positions in total is $201,000.
And board members, this was part of the conversation we had last school year. Initially, the interest was to add a sixth region. However, at that time, we discussed that, and the decision was made to actually eliminate that sixth region with the retirement of Ms. Barnes, because the school transformation office unfortunately sat outside of the other regions. And so when a school declined in its academic performance, they came under Ms. Barnes's purview. The difficulty with that isn't that, and Ms. Barnes and her team have done an absolute amazing job. The difficulty and the problem with that model is that when schools improve and they exit Ms. Barnes' region, they return back to another regional who has no knowledge of the work that was been done in that school for the last 2 or 3 years or however long it took to exit that school. And so now there's a disconnect, because Ms. Barnes was there and her team was there to reinforce all of the school improvement tenets to make sure that the school remained on a positive trajectory. When you pull a school out from that level of support and reassign it back to a region, again, that gap of information and knowledge creates that roller coaster effect that we see in schools that improve to a C or a B, and then all of a sudden they decline back to a D, and then they improve again. And so we sought to eliminate that, and we discussed this last year when we talked about the restructuring, because what we wanted now was this Office of School Improvement to work hand in hand. Now, what you see there are schools that are identified for support, but those schools are also still under a regional director, a regional assistant superintendent, because ultimately they are responsible for ensuring that work's being done in accordance with what the Office of School Improvement is outlining for them, or the Transformation Office as we've listed it here. So I hope that clarifies a bit. So we did not, and again, we had anticipated adding a sixth region, so we had that cost savings come back to us, and essentially it didn't come back to us because it wasn't dollars that we had spent. So we did not add the sixth region. We simply restructured within our existing system. Ms. Yumini Berrien will take over for the Office of School Transformation as its leader. She is very knowledgeable, very skilled, and will work very collaboratively with our other regions. In addition to which, I see this as an added benefit for other regional assistant superintendents. And by no means, they're in their role because they've demonstrated success and experience. However, I believe that this also becomes an opportunity to continue to reinforce and enhance their own skills, because as they're supervising their own schools and they're pulling data and they see a school that may be on a negative trajectory through the progress monitoring that we have, now they have the resources and the supports that they need to infuse additional supports into that school. Because they can reach out to the Office of School Transformation and say, hey, I may need help here. It may just be a particular grade level. And so we have the staff that can then push in and help assist and do some data analysis and provide additional support. So it's a much better streamlined process, all in all. And so I see that Ms. Miller had a question or a comment.
Thanks. I have both a question and a comment. First of all, we've done this a couple of times throughout my years with Polk County, moving this, and there's good on both sides. You know, if you're just in charge of elementary schools, you can all talk to each other and they have that idea. But from the other side of that community and following students, it does make, I see how this is effective, because I'm going to know if I'm a family, I'm going to meet my regional, I'm going to know that's my regional as I move through, if I need supports, if it's a child who needs extensive whatever it is, they have the chain of command stays the same, which I think is very important. I do have a question, and maybe the superintendent can explain it, or Mr. Pitts. Can we just talk, we're adding a position. I lost one of my great principals, so I know this is going to be a great position, but can someone talk about the difference, the role between a chief of high schools and a director of high schools, and how that will work? Because if you're reading this, it may look very similar.
Ms. Collins is here to answer questions on behalf of that department. She can further explain. It's even better that she's actually in that role, but she can explain.
Good morning, everybody. So in this reorg, and I think you will see on the representation that Mr. Pitts is going to provide. In order to build a really strong K-12 continuum for students, we've broken up, as he shared with you, the regional K-8s, and then I'll be working directly with those to build really a seamless articulation through our traditional schools. But also additionally, in my new title, I've been working directly with Coach Talbot and supervising he and his staff, which is athletics, use of facilities, PE, and curriculum for that. But we're now bringing workforce under my supervision. So that really leads to why the determination was chief of high schools, because that I think is something that is done more across the state and recognized as the title for someone over those areas. And then Mr. Bruno will be working with me as senior director, very similar to what Mr. Campisi and Ms. Kendrick are doing for the K-8 regions. How exactly we are going to divvy up those responsibilities remains a little to be seen. We are taking over, as well as getting Mr. Cochran's workforce, we're also taking over sites and schools that he supported previously. So we'll be working directly to support the technical colleges with their academics. We'll be supporting all of the virtual programs, Mr. Wilson and the Real Academy, Polk Virtual, Grad Academy, and then additionally, both Bill Duncan and Don Woods will be under my supervision. So we'll be working to support them on the operation side as well as the academic side. Does that answer your question?
It does, and I think doing this will also help. We talked about, and I've talked about in the past, with our academies, when programs come in and principals may have a different vision, that we maintain the vision of the dollars spent in an academy so they stay there and that they flourish. And I think we just haven't had oversight of that before. Not that we're taking anything away from a principal, but making sure that when the community invests their time and efforts into one of these academies, that now you will be overseeing that continuum of
Right, and I think the added bonus is that it's seamless for everybody. It's seamless for principals, because then Mr. Cochran and I are both in there and we're sharing Mr. Hyde's vision, and I'm aware of what is going on and supporting that. He's aware of what's going on in the schools and supporting that, and so we're not as siloed. And I think the communication across all stakeholders, kids, parents, business partners, I've been able and very fortunate to work directly with Dr. Ryder and some of the things that Lakeland Leeds is doing. And so that's the first time someone from a school supervision perspective has really had an audience and been able to interact with the business partners and the community stakeholders. So I think it's really going to be a good process for all of our stakeholders, including our school principals.
Are you going to continue your support or your supervision or support in collaboration with ESC on transition programs, including the center schools? Does that fall under you?
I don't have the center schools. Those fall within the geographic regions, but I'm working with Ms. Castles to really shore up the transition things so that we can not just do the seamless K-12, but the pre-K post-secondary, and transition would fall in that because we have a lot of work to do there as well.
Thank you.
Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you. I see that you sent us an email with the breakdown of which schools are in which region as I was going to ask for it, but I also was going to ask if we can get a map for the 4 regions that are true regions of where those schools are, just so we can kind of see where the cutoffs are between.
Yeah, we can provide that.
I'm a visual learner, I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
But you should see, when you look at that, again, as I stated, all of the schools listed under the school turnaround or transformation office are
Are us.
actually listed under the regions. And that's the important, that I think, in my opinion, over time, that's a missing component. That can lead to schools declining and then going through this cycle because they're so used to this ongoing support. And that's great that they get ongoing mentoring and professional development, and they get this critical eye that comes in and can help them do their classroom walkthroughs and observe instruction and do all of those things. And all of a sudden, it disappears. And that can be very difficult, especially in schools that have turnover. As you know, many of our Title I schools may see more staff turnover because it's a heavy lift and people get burned out over time. So it's important for us to make sure those systems are still there and the regional understands if a school exits, this is what's been done there historically that's been successful. I need to continue to reiterate those things and support them effectively. So,
Awesome.
Ms. Fields?
When I first came on the school board in 2002, this concept was very much similar to what's being proposed, so this is nothing new. And every superintendent comes with different ideas and with different vision, and that's fine. I would imagine the same question is that we'll be getting job descriptions to mirror these changes. And all that I'm gonna ask is that we have enough time to review it. Because if my memory serves me correctly, in one of the emails from you, Mr. Pitts, you said that we hope to have this approved in July. I believe that's what you said. And so if we're having all these new job descriptions and new changes, I would just really appreciate making sure that we have adequate enough time to review everything that is being proposed, please.
Yes, and in this specific section, the job descriptions are already updated and ready to give.
Great. And then the other thing is, I haven't checked my email, but thank you, because that was going to be my question, is where the school is going to be distributed. So I'll check it, and if I have any questions, I'll let you know. Thank you.
Sorry, Dr. Allen.
Just simple question, looking at the supervision roster for the schools, the asterisks that you have noted along the way, I did not see what that was representing. I did see the double asterisks for certain schools. I don't know if that makes sense on my question.
It does. I'd have to go back to the notes and look to see. Let me check the other form. In the meantime, you have another question, Dr. Allen, while
I think
review
that's
that?
it, actually, and I don't need it immediately.
Ms. Wyatt? Yes, ma'am. Ms. Wyatt?
I just wanted to confirm, it looks like the 4 regions align with at least most of our community liaisons. Is that the goal for those regions, to align with the community liaisons as well?
It is. It's to provide more consistent alignment across the school district, in fact.
Does that mean we'll be getting a south one or have a south one?
Say that again?
Because south currently, will they be shifting who, because there's 4 currently?
There's still a discussion to be
Okay.
had about adding that 5th region
Gotcha.
school community liaison.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
thank you.
Ms. Collins, on the sheet, I'm going to ask you, so we can get a response to Dr. Allen, excuse me. On the responsibilities matrix where the schools are listed, the double asterisks were for schools that were previously, or DA schools that are not in turnaround. What does a single asterisk represent? Do you recall?
I think the ones with the single asterisks are the ones going to be supported by the Office of Transformation. I'd have to see, I don't see it, so.
That is correct. Cross-referencing them, that's correct. Thank you for clarifying. Dr. Allen, we'll provide, as Ms. Fields has requested, we'll provide an additional footnote, the single asterisk, Yes, sir. Thank you.
Well, I would say I'm very happy about my regional.
I think we all are.
Well, I'm glad to hear about that. I'm glad to hear. Ms. Miller, or Ms. Wyatt, excuse me. I cover you?
I think that was my guess.
Ms. Miller?
Back to that communication piece that I'm looking for the board, or that fantastic app that's being created somewhere out there. This would be a great addition to a one-click, I'm on the road, I pulled up somewhere, a parent called, who is your person? I'll find out for you right now. I don't know if we're still working on that, but this would be helpful to be quickly accessed for your board members.
So that app exists in 2 locations. There's an app that you currently have, that's your principal profile.
Right.
And then there's also the app of all school-based administrators with their contact information. It lists assistant principals, deans.
2 apps?
There are 2 apps. And the reason for that is the information is that about principal profile contains some personal information that we are not making
No, I don't need detailed information that quickly, but contact information is, I will go review both apps.
If you review just the single one that has our PCPS logo on it that Mr. Talbot has put together, that's where all the school-based information is. That will be updated now that additional new principals have been hired. And then after, if and when all the changes or proposed changes are approved by the board, there will be additional updates to it prior to the start of the school year. But that's your one-stop shop for school-based information.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Go ahead, Mr. Pitts.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, moving on to the Deputy Superintendent's Office Assistant Superintendent of Support Services, which is Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis and most of his senior staff are at a conference this week, so I think I can cover this. Now, it's been quite a few years since we've really provided extra support to transportation, and we've continued to add students, as we all know. So what Mr. Davis is proposing is to unfund a clerk specialist and fund a safety specialist instead of the clerk specialist. Another new position is an analyst under support services. What we were missing, one of the areas we've been missing in that support services is an analyst type of person. So as we talk about rezoning and restructuring our bus routes, that analyst position will be very important. It's time to add another transportation dispatcher with the additional students that we are adding. And the last piece for transportation is the request to replace 40 sub-bus attendants with appointed bus attendants. So currently, those subs are like a substitute teacher in a way. Bus drivers start out as a sub, however, they don't have any benefits. That's the one piece. We're not talking about salary change here for these folks, but it is the addition of health benefits because what happens is as they go through that process, they're trained, they get trained, they don't have health benefits, then they leave our system and go work for somebody else. So the request is that, and we have had the additional need for new appointed bus attendants or just permanent bus attendants for a few years, and Mr. Davis has been asking year after year, but it's only been until this year that we've had the funds to actually make this happen. So in total, the cost to the general, it's 2 additional positions for transportation and cost of $779,000, which is primarily the cost of the benefits for those substitute bus drivers.
General fund?
General fund. It would be paid from the transportation categorical, which is general fund, but we overspend that anyway, so. Any questions, comments?
Mrs. Fields has a question.
Okay.
Is doing an amazing job with the limited resources that they have. So I'm happy that we're able to find a way to make the subs whole and to hopefully help with retention and recruitment as well.
That is the hope, and I'm sure this will greatly help having those benefits. Thank you. Anybody
No
else?
other questions?
No other questions, okay. The next division that we're going to look at under Mr. Davis is school nutrition. Very similar to what we've mentioned previously in other departments is with the growth in our district is to add more support. So first request is to fund a supervisor, an additional supervisor for school nutrition. The second request is to reactivate, it should have just said to fund a specialist for school nutrition. At one point, we had unfunded that position, but the need is great to bring back another specialist. And third is to upgrade a supervisor of school nutrition to an analyst of school nutrition. That would be an addition of, in total, of 2 new positions, a total cost of $136,000. However, all of that is school nutrition funds and does not affect the general fund. Questions?
No, sir.
No, sir. Okay, great.
Ms. Fields, I made a note to add, at the bottom of each slide, we'll add those footnotes that there's no impact to the general budget because this is funded by school nutrition.
All right, moving over to Teaching and Learning Division, Department of Assessment, Accountability, and Evaluation, also known as AA&E, is to upgrade a testing warehouse technician to a senior testing warehouse technician. This gentleman has been that person in the warehouse, and that job has just continued to grow. So with benefits, the estimated cost to the general fund is $14,000. Okay, I'm not seeing questions. I'm going to move over to the Office of Acceleration, Innovation, School Counseling, and Charter. The first 3 bullet points are title changes to our current counseling senior coordinators. The first is to change Student Success Early Warning System to Senior Coordinator of School Counseling, grades 9 to 12. So you can see the transition is to do it by grade level, to have these senior coordinators over certain grades. Title change of Senior Coordinator of School Counseling Services 612 to Senior Coordinator of School Counseling Service 68. And then a title change for Senior Coordinator of School Counseling Services K8 to Senior Coordinator of School Counseling Services that will oversee K5. So those are no cost, but just title and a little bit of responsibility change. Next request is to fund an Assistant Director of School Counseling. This is a brand new position, and we do have the job description ready, and we'll send to you this week. The next few positions you've already seen previously when we were awarded the next iteration of the MSAP grant. That included a director for magnet schools, a curriculum specialist of accelerated programs, and a TRST magnet schools 11-month. You've already seen and approved. This is just so we're capturing it to show the difference between last year to this year. And the last request for this division is to fund an analyst office of charter schools. As we've grown in students, we will also continue to grow in the number of charter schools. So this position is needed to assist with those additional responsibilities in new schools. In total, it's 5 positions. However, you had already seen 3 of those positions. Cost is $173,000 to general fund, and for the MSAP grant positions, that is a total cost of $310,000.
Ms. Miller?
I haven't seen Office of Acceleration Innovation the way you group these before. I haven't seen that before with school counseling. But can we have someone talk a little bit about those changes? Because we've talked about the need for adding services. Will the title change? Can we have somebody speak to that? Is there someone?
What's the question?
We're changing senior coordinator. We're changing the title. We're changing the name, senior coordinator, student services, early warning system to senior coordinator, school counseling services. Will it change the job description of what they're doing? Will it add duties to that? And what are those is the question.
Yes.
Good morning, thank you. Ms. Miller, what we're doing is we're adding the counseling service. What happened is Susie Wilcoxon was the early warning, and what happened is we've moved it to break it at where we do more specific for high school, middle school, and elementary. So, for instance, LaQuaria Nottage was doing the K-12, which you're having to maneuver all of the middle school and the high school graduation requirements. Since it was a duplication of services, since Susie was doing a lot of this early warning, working with the success, college and career success in the high schools, it was very logical just moving that so she can spend all of her time just in high school. It's really to help high school graduation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Move on to K-12 Curriculum, Office of Literacy and Media Services. We are requesting a new position, Director of Media Services. And as you all know, that area has become a hotbed. And the state statutes concerning or regarding library books has brought this need. So that would be a new position. We are going to unfund a senior technician library automation, and then we are downgrading in that area a 12-month media specialist down to a 10-month media specialist. So those changes result in a net of 0 new positions. However, with the director, its position being added, it's going to cost an additional $61,000 to the general fund. And the change from the 12-month to the 10-month media specialist is going to have a reduction to ESSER funding, is where that position is funded from, of $19,600. Okay, moving on. I am going to ask for Mr. McNaughton or one of his staff to help with the ESOL changes. Great, there. Would you mind coming up, Dr. Trejo? I'm sorry. I didn't see you, didn't see you sitting on the side. One of the requests is fine arts falls under this division, and it is to upgrade the director of fine arts to senior director of fine arts. That position, this is a great opportunity, and that's just to really align with the changes we've made in other areas of upgrades from director to senior director. Also, for fine arts, we have a TRST that has retired, and the request is to change that position from a TRST to a senior coordinator of music. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Dr. Trejo.
Well, it's been fun coming back home, I will say. Prior to my transition, I walked into a department that really needs a lot of love and care. Prior to my transition, my understanding was that there were other departments that were elevated, and so the ESOL department was one that needed that opportunity. And now that I have been in the trenches with my team, along with some amazing principals out there in the schools, it really does need that love and care. And the individuals that work daily in and out. It's just incredible what they do. I have joked, I have said this, I know this is recording, but it's so true. And I've said to Mr. McNaughton, I said, I'm trying my best to stay married because I have worked endlessly since I've been here. Lots of sleepless nights, lots of really great work. It's a positive, but I need help. And I need help, so I have proposed with hoping to have an opportunity to have an assistant director to help with the workload. Our population continues to grow. As you all know, we're here servicing 169 different schools. The English language students are only growing. We service them at the charter schools as well and private schools. We are now currently sitting at 14,533 students, and who's counting, with the amount of support that is needed for these babies. And that doesn't include what's going to happen in August and September when we return with regard to the initial evaluations, the assessments that the students have to take, the evaluations with the students with regard to their language proficiency. So in order to really grow this department to better support our students regarding the language proficiency, increasing that, as well as student achievement, we have to have a real team that is that has the opportunity to be elevated themselves. So the positions are an elevation. No one is losing their job. Everyone will have a job here in the school district of Polk County. The job descriptions will have certain criteria that will need to be met, so everybody will apply for the positions. But there is an opportunity to elevate the positions because of the workload and the growth of our student population. And so I think it's time to really give the ESOL department that love and care that is so much needed.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate you coming up. In total, for all of those changes, is a net increase of 2 positions. Actually, this will result in a reduction to the general fund of $47,000, but an increase to Title III of $126,000.
Ms. Miller?
I was taking my quick notes, Jason. I just want to I have a comment. This is an area that has needed a lot of attention, our ESOL support. I hear that a lot. I'm glad that we have addressed the translator for Haitian Creole, and I know I've had questions about what's required translation and what, because we have so many students, especially Spanish-speaking students, that documents like IEPs that need to be transcribed. I just want to make sure that my comment is made that this is a desperate need to have those roles filled, and if we're doing it with Title III money, that's even better than general fund. So, thank you.
I totally 100% agree with that statement. Thank you.
You're good, Mr. Pitts.
All right. Professional development, and you'll see this not only through this presentation, but in future years. We are unfunding as we attrition out TRSTs in certain areas. We're replacing that position to a senior coordinator. So this is an unfunding of a vacant position, TRST lead mentor, to a senior coordinator for coaching and mentoring. That change is a offset of $5,000, and I did not put down what grant that is from, so I apologize. Any questions on that slide? Okay, learning support. I was not able to, on this presentation, just fit the text with the spreadsheet. I'm going to switch over to the spreadsheet here first. Maybe. All right, I'll figure that out in a minute. One of the things that we have done in learning support is we have, to make sure services are met, we contract out to various agencies. And as we are able to hire folks, we will switch between positions and contracts. That happens kind of a fluid throughout the year. So the first few positions here filled in a previous year, not included on the blue sheets. Let me remind everybody what a blue sheet is. That is the staffing formula for schools. At one time, it was actually on a blue sheet, so that's how it became known as blue sheets. So the first few positions here, hearing screener, para ESE contained hearing screener, and 4 teachers for local vision were filled in the previous year, but weren't budgeted that way. They were really budgeted as contract positions. So this is just to be transparent in what's happened in that department as far as those positions that were added throughout the year. Ms. Castles or Ms. Williams presented a presentation on February 28th. So your next few positions here were the ones that were presented on February 28th. That's the unfunding of the LEA facilitators, changing that role a bit to an ESE facilitator, unfunding the position of a staffing specialist with a new job description of compliance specialist. And the next few positions would be brand new to you. And I know that Ms. Williams is here. Could I have you come up and just walk the board through this new information that they are seeing?
Hi, good morning, Board, Madam Chair, Mr. Hyde. I'm going to introduce the Director of Instruction of Exceptional Student Education. She can work through it with you, and then if you have any additional questions, I'll be here as well.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Board. The funded positions that we're looking at with the program compliance specialists, those are really taking the place of what the staffing specialists are. So what we're trying to do is to truncate what we're doing to help support the schools more in a linear fashion so that we can have them be able to support schools numbered by like 6 or 7 and allow for us to support the ESE facilitators that were once the LEA facilitators. I mean, the LEA facilitators that were once are now going to be the ESE facilitators. So we're going to have them in our house. We're all going to be one happy family and kind of learning together what that does. Within that, the actual denotations that you see, the hearing screener, we were looking to unfund one of the positions because we have only a need for the 3. You'll notice that under the teacher for hospital homebound, we're looking to build more capacity at the hospital homebound range because we are looking to build the home instruction program so that we can have that here in Polk County, which is definitely a need for some of our students. It's one of those pathways that we need instead of them going to an alt ed site, have that consideration in the continuum for us. So we're going to build that capacity in hospital homebound with the assistant director of hospital homebound. So that's why the need or the request for 2 more teachers, along with their growth. We are getting more students that even past COVID still need the hospital homebound program services that we have to offer here. So next what you'll see is a paraprofessional of an ESE self-contained transition unit that is being deleted. And if it is necessary or required that we need to add that back after our 8-day count, we'll revisit that and see if there's a continued need. Then you'll look and see that the adaptive PE teachers that we have taken away 1 because we're trying to triage that and make sure that we are supporting the schools with the number of students that we have, but then also build capacity on our campuses within our PE teachers to be able to assert and give the specially designed instruction by way of physical education. Then next on the list is the, the sign language federal taken away so that we can look at using our resources to the fullest capacity. We do have enough to make sure that we cover all of the needs of the students in our deaf and hard of hearing community, and we have scheduled with the powers that be, including the teachers, as part of that process, and that's why you'll see that deletion. And the other deletion with the para for the ESC for the sign language for 3 to be deleted. I'm going to refer to my sheet because I made some notes here. And then the temporary speech college worker. I'm sure that some of you have heard about the job description change for the speech language pathologist position so that we can hire and recruit some more speech pathologists and then do that in a more formative way so that we can build and grow our own and keep them and help them get into a master's program, either through consortium or with relationships with our universities that we've already reached out to help support our speech language pathologists that have bachelor levels, and then support them through their CFY, which is their clinical competency that they have to obtain in order to get their master's level. And one of the requirements is for them to be hired within a school system so that they can obtain that master's level, and we can support them and grow our own. And with that, we will lessen the contracted services so that we can have bulk for hire SLPs. I know that was a lot, but is there anything else that you may need? Let me see. Oh,
Ms. Miller?
I just have, I'm sure this is a big chunk. I just have a couple of questions right off the bat. Later, can we get the numbers of hospital homebound? You said an alternative to alt ed, and a home program, which is different than we have done here in the past. And right now, hospital homebound is very minimal, and I tell parents you may get 3 hours of instruction a week, if that. And so I don't encourage hospital homebound unless the child is medically fragile. And we have a lot of kids going to that for anxiety and stuff that I think we can treat elsewhere. So I'd like to learn more about what you said, maybe in an email later. And then I see the speech the speech therapists that we're trying to grow our own. Are we doing anything with PT and OT assistants, hiring that lower level and doing the same for those two areas?
we have, so two things. I'll answer your hospital homebound question first. I will be working closely with the Assistant Director, Lisa Carr, and planning for looking at how we can start to emerge some of our kids that have been in hospital homebound for quite some time and look at having planning around that. I agree with you completely that hospital homebound should be used on a temporary basis to get them what they need, but get them back to where they need to go. And so we're going to be looking at how we can build some fading plans into the actual IEP conversation at the table. The home instruction piece is a layer that we don't have currently in Polk County. And so it's just another layer for us to look at when we're working in tandem with Brett Butler's office. And when we're looking at kids that do some BAD things for a minute, and then they just need a little bit more assistance. And so they can have a place to be able to kind of network with teachers that are familiar with them, that are Polk County teachers. And we're going to use the hospital homebound virtual platform to help facilitate that for some of our kiddos, because they may not be able to come back to school, but we still have to provide that level of service for them until they can get back into school by way of however they re-enter, if that makes sense.
It does. I just want to make sure services are provided at home, because a lot of those students who are using that behavior to communicate their issues outside of school.
You are correct. Yes, ma'am. That's a way to do this.
Okay, thank you.
And then the
PT assistants, like
Yes.
hiring a lower level PT/OT and then bringing them on.
Yes, so we've had some conversion talk about that. It is about being able to find them, first off, and we have been really diligent with Dr. Hodges, has been really working with the community and the colleges to get some of our OTAs, and then going out and speaking to the colleges about getting their services here at a lower rate and then building them the same way we are with the SLPs. It's a little harder because the parameters around that is they require a doctorate level, and there's a lot more oversight. But yes, the conversations are being had so that we can start to build in some of that. And we actually did just change a position so that we could hire a lower level with the supervision of the higher level therapist.
Because I think we're not providing medical-based therapy, we're providing educational-based therapy, and we can't get around paying those people, and this would be an alternative if we could bring them in at the tech level.
It definitely is, and it also supports our initiative to move towards Medicaid billing at a more frequented rate so that we could give the services provided and then also tie that into the Medicaid model to support them and to get back what we're giving as far as services for Polk County.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
No further questions?
Thank you.
So the 8 positions that were added during the year, that's a cost of $496,000 to the general fund. On the February 28th workshop, it was actually a reduction of 7 positions out of IDA funding into the general fund to a cost of $17,000 net to the general fund, and then a reduction of $1 million. That's a mistake there. Let me make sure. Okay, gotcha. There's a mistake there on the amount. And then the total of what you're seeing new today at the June 27th workshop is a reduction of 9 positions. That'll reduce $166,000 from the general fund and $214,000 out of IDEA. Okay. Let's see if I can fix my screen here.
Ms. Miller.
While we're waiting for your screen, I just want to say, for a long time, I'm going to say 15 years, I've talked to this board about general fund and how a lot of districts match funds from general fund. This is the first time we've ever relieved IDA by positions that could come out of the general fund, and it's a long time coming. So that's thanks to the superintendent and to Jason Pitts and the finance department that understands that some of these services are not buried into the IDA budget, that they can be supported through general fund. It relieves that for the things that have to be paid for through IDA. Thank you, Jason Pitts.
Thank you. All right, moving on to learning support, behavior, and mental health support and discipline department. Presented back in February 28th was to fund 6 additional mental health facilitators. That cost is the funds for that's provided through the mental health categorical within the general fund. Also to fund 7 teachers behavior. I'm looking over Ms. Williams here. What are the BEH? Oh, you want, okay, you're gonna ask Ms. Santos to come down. Okay, I'm stepping out of this is not my comfort zone.
Board members, while Ms. Santos steps down to the microphone, just a quick point, a reminder, as Ms. Jenkins went through the budget at the beginning, we did receive a significant enhancement this year in our mental health allocation, almost $1 million. So those dollars largely go to offset any costs with us increasing our mental health staffing within the school district, and that will be added to the footnotes as well.
And also, at the February 28th, there was a request for 15 paras for behavior support technicians. However, the new request is 10, so I've highlighted in yellow that reduction from 15 to 10. And then, Ms. Santos, would you
Hi, everybody.
talk about what they haven't seen before?
All right, so the funding of the 7 teachers, VE, BH, those are what we call our academic behavior support teachers. Those teachers work under our senior managers of behavior, and they provide support in the schools. When I first started this job 15 years ago, we had 5. We are now up to 18. I currently have 14 hired. And so, and so we've increased that support level. And so the additional paras is to further increase that support to have more consistent. So we have a student who's in crisis, then we can have somebody there bell to bell for about a week until we put a plan together. So again, we're just increasing the level of support for our schools when students have behaviors that are impacting the classroom. And as far as the mental health facilitators, I want to tell you that when we first started in 2018, we had 26. We're going to be up to 45 now. And that money that comes from mental health, it continues to just increase that number. Our ratios are very low, but we continue to increase that mental health access to all our students by increasing that number of staff. And then so the mental health counselors. So when we went to Behavior Mental Health Department, there was a mental health counselor who was attached to our countywide. So she came to our department. She never was the position was never changed. So that's just a change into mental health facilitator. With the changes to their pay scale last summer, they all became one. She was 10 months, but she is now 11 months. So we are now putting her under mental health facilitator. So that is why we're unfunding that. Nobody's losing a job. We're just changing a position title for our staff. And then system specialist has been empty for a year. So we are not in need of that anymore for our department.
There are no questions.
Yes. Thank you. So for this division, it's from the last year's budget to this year's budget, the addition of 21 positions for a total of 1.4 million to the general fund, which most of that is categorical, that mental health categorical, which can only be spent on mental health. Now we're going to move over to the student services division. What you've already, previous year, just to reflect on the record that we funded throughout the year, were 5 prevention educator TRSTs. And then on the February 28th workshop, we talked about the addition or the need for the addition of 5 LPNs, a senior manager of health services, and 10 additional school social workers. That was presented at that meeting. That was a total of 1.3 million to the general fund. And then I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Williams' staff, Sherry. She always has a smile. Yes. To talk about the 3 new positions or areas there.
Good morning. Madam Chair, board members, thank you for the opportunity to come and share some information with you this morning. So in regards to the changes for student services, the 5 prevention educator TRSTs are nursing positions. When we were in the midst of the COVID emergency, we added those 5 positions very quickly, but they were not added to our org chart. So they reflect current staff who are already in place. We want to keep the current staff who are already in place because we have seen the need for health services grow since that COVID emergency in the past few years. The 5 licensed practical nurses are a reflection of that. One of the things that we struggle with, and many of you are familiar with, is the nursing shortage that we have across the country. So it's very difficult for us sometimes to find nursing substitutes when our LPNs at the school levels are out for any reason. So our hope is by directly hiring some of those LPNs and assigning them to the region, we will help to offset some of that substitute gap that we see when it comes to our LPNs. We do struggle with getting long-term LPN substitutes, and this would be a way to hopefully fill some of that gap and allow for some consistency to some of our medically fragile students. When it comes to the senior manager for health services, the senior manager for health services is a position that we would like to advocate for because it will put us into a proper medical supervision cycle. Right now, our nurses are currently supervised by Miss Audrey Kelly, who many of you are familiar with, who is a fantastic and wonderful supervisor, but her background is not as a nurse. And so we would like to have a nurse actually supervising our nurses. That will also expand opportunities for us when it comes to Medicaid billing, which we are trying to increase and improve. When it comes to the 10 social workers that we're hoping to add, our plan for those social workers is to start a program that we have not had the opportunity to use in the past in Polk County Public Schools, which is something called counseling as a related service. Counseling as a related service is something for our students with exceptional disabilities, and it would allow them to directly access a hired mental health professional in the school system rather than having to seek an outside contract for some of those services. And it really does focus more on their issues as impacting their performance in school rather than impacting their performance perhaps in the community at large. So really trying to increase those school level supports. And again, those services would be Medicaid billable. So if we can add those positions, we're increasing our opportunity to bill some additional supports for Medicaid. The additional 5 practical nurses, that is a duplicate. We accidentally listed that twice for you. We do not need 10 licensed practical nurses. We are only seeking 5 licensed practical nurses, so we apologize for that duplicate. The secretary, too, we would like to upgrade that to a wellness clerk specialist. This is actually a return for this current individual to a position she held previously. And the reason why we are asking for her to return to the clerk specialist position is because our Phoenix program, which is our drug education and intervention program, has more than doubled since COVID, unfortunately. And what we would like to do with that position is to be able to offer some on-site screening and support to our students. That is something that we have done in the past, but we have not been able to do that in the most recent years. We'd like to bring that service back for our families and our students who are going through that program. And as that same logic follows, we would like to ask for 2 additional social workers in our Phoenix program. As I have said, the number of students who are sadly coming through that program has more than doubled since COVID. And so adding 2 social workers would double the current staff assigned to that program. Thank you very much.
All right, for the record, that's a net addition over last year of 23 positions for a total of $1.9 million to the general fund.
Mr. Pitts, just to make you aware of the time, it's 11:15. Looks like we have about 6 departments left, maybe 8. So we will not get through them all. So anything we do not cover by 11:30, we will recess as planned at 11:30, and we will bring those back at the next workshop.
All right. Thank you for the time check.
Yes, sir.
We're going to move over to business services, federal programs and grant management. Request is to fund a director of grants and acquisitions. That would be a split funded position. 75% of that would come from Title I and possibly Perkins and possibly Head Start, depending upon the amount of time spent over those areas. A funding change for the senior coordinator of grants and acquisition. That's the current position, and that's the movement of 50%, moving to 50% of that position being funded by general fund and 50% of other grants. So in total, it's a reduction of $44,000 to the general fund. We are requesting an upgrade for our coordinator of homeless student services to a senior coordinator of homeless student services. That's unfortunately another area that continues to grow in Polk County. And along with that is to fund an additional position titled homeless advocate. Those are all Title I positions, Part A. So the request in total would just be 1 new position. That's that director. These changes would result in a $13,000 savings to the general fund, but an additional cost to Title I and other grants of $131,000. Questions? Okay, great. Going to move on to information systems and technology. This was all presented back on March 28th by Ms. Pasco. The need in our change in our structure from going 1-to-1 was the driver for most all of these positions. It's an upgrade of a senior manager ERS to a director. Org change, ITV will now be called Apple Support, and the position supervisor of ITV will become supervisor Apple Support. And also we're requesting to fund 4 additional computer support technicians. Total of $10,000 to the general fund. $301,000 for those computer support technicians would come from ESSER funding.
No questions.
No questions. Next slide, again, this is what Ms. Pasco presented back on March 28th, upgrading a senior manager of systems operations to director, system operations, upgrade senior manager of network operations to director of network operations and information security officer. An upgrade of supervisor of land services to a senior manager of land services, an upgrade to 4 IST local area network coordinators to senior coordinators. And I would say the biggest change that we're seeing here is the change of reporting of the network managers at schools from principals to the district office for better alignment of resources. We would also like to fund 16 floating network managers. Those network manager positions resided on the blue sheet before. Now they're going to be under the district office, but we need to have floating positions just like we do with school safety that can go support a school as problems arise or somebody's out, because we can't go a day without a network manager at a school. And those 16 positions would be funded out of ESSER. And the last would be an upgrade of Director of Business Process Support to a Senior Director of Business Process Support, which was also presented at the March 28th board meeting. The cost of all of those changes, $179,000 to the general fund and $828,000 to ESSER funding for those floating network managers. Through that quick, I see smiles. Oh,
Sorry.
the smile meant a question, I'm sorry.
The network managers, I just have a question, the ones that are going to be in-house that we're sending out. Network managers have changed over the years, you know this. We used to have more like degree-based IT network people in schools, and it kind of we shifted that. I don't know if it was a savings, like a cost to shift it. It went to very much people without that intensive background. What will these positions look like? Are we using IT related, or is it para? I mean, like, who are we using for these positions?
So that's a very great point to bring up. We transitioned the network manager, like you stated, away from folks that had a teaching degree and matched the salary to what network managers would make out in the business world. So we're no longer calling anybody that's a teacher network manager as they attrition out. Those positions just become what we now have as a network manager. So they're technology, all those positions are technology based.
Is it a higher salary?
It is a lower salary just because of the cost of having a certified teacher. So it is a lower salary.
Thank you.
No further questions, sir.
Okay, all right. We're going to move on to facilities and operations. We're requesting 2 upgrades, upgrade of manager of maintenance services to a senior coordinator of maintenance services. And let me just start off by saying, years ago, when the recession hit, we really reduced the amount of positions we had in facilities. And we all know we're growing at an exponential rate again, and it's time that we really beef up facilities. So there's a request to upgrade the manager of maintenance planning to a senior coordinator of maintenance planning. We're requesting to add an additional fire and safety official. We only had 1 covering the entire district. We're requesting 2 new positions to the planning department. 1 would be a senior coordinator and 1 would be an analyst. There's an offset to those positions. We had been contracting out with an outside agency, but we're going to bring that back in-house since we have wonderful director of planning. I'm going to ask for a additional senior coordinator for architect and construction services. Add an additional specialist of maintenance planning. Add an additional preventive maintenance recording specialist. And then 1 additional upgrade that would be a senior coordinator of construction services to director of construction services. If there's any specific questions on that, Mr. Fix is here in the audience. Those changes would result in an addition of 6 positions at a cost of $460,000 to the general fund. Okay.
Ms.
All right.
Fields?
Thank you. I don't have any questions. I just know that many, many moons ago, facilities was willing to give up a lot of positions. And I don't know if they've ever been able to get back to where they need to be. So it's good to see that we're adding, bringing some of those positions back and upgrading them because they do a great work for our district. And I think that it's time for them to be able to have those added positions as needed.
Thank you. I agree. We right-sized the department at the time, and it's definitely been a long time coming that we've brought these changes. I also want to mention publicly that we have an area of responsibility with foremen in the facilities department that we need to address some salary issues. It was not brought today, but that'll be brought at the next work session. I know those gentlemen have been in discussion with me and the superintendent, and I just wanted to say it wasn't an oversight. It was on purpose to address at a second work session for that. Any other questions?
Ms. Miller?
I appreciate you mentioning that, Mr. Pitts, because that's been a discussion in the past about that group. I just want to ask, and maybe Mr. Fix knows, are these positions, because some of these are very specific in training, do we have people inside that we're going to move to these positions? Or are we looking to try to recruit these positions from the non-public school world?
The quick answer is, in the upgrades, it would be people that are there today who have been just exemplary at doing their jobs for a number of years and well past deserving of this. In the new positions, no, these are ones that we would be looking to go outside of the educational world because these are very unique in that these are more along the lines of in the realm of planning or in construction or whatever, unless we're able to snag, if that's a proper term, unless we're able to recruit someone from one of our sister districts whom he or she may have specifically school-related experiences in those areas as well. That would be the most ideal thing if we could do that. I'm not sure that.
No, yeah, that's fine.
All
Thank
right.
you. I just know that there's a lack of people for interviewing for these jobs with this specific criteria.
It is. It's very difficult. As generous as you all are with this, it's the competition in a hot economy for these kinds of positions is very difficult. And then, of course, in a low economy, I can't justify the positions, and so we just kind of get into that dichotomy of it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
No more further questions.
I think this is an appropriate place to stop.
Well, I was going to offer the board members the opportunity. There are only 4 departments left to summarize, so I'll look to the board if you want to continue, or again, like I said, we can easily break and bring these 4 back at the next workshop.
I think it depends on how long.
These are, concerning the departments, I don't know that there'll be much. But you know what, for the sake of not knowing, I'd ask that we table those to the next workshop.
I would just ask, I want to make sure that we can still, I know the goal was to bring them to the board meeting in July so that they can start getting hired before the beginning of the school year. Would everyone be comfortable going through, and if you have any questions based on what we have in the PowerPoint in this, submitting those questions beforehand, just so that we could bring those 4 departments back to back in July? So that we don't have to have a work session and then hold them until August. I just want to make sure we're not delaying getting people in.
The only thing that I would request is giving us, giving us enough time to review stuff. I mean, we can't get something the night before. Not that you all are doing that, but we have to have enough time. I have to have enough time to review it and make sure that I'm making a good decision for the students and for the employees of the school district.
So by the end of next week, you will have all the documents that weren't submitted today, the job descriptions, the way the org chart actually looks by pictures. And then I won't say what I was going to say because it's not needed, but I'll get that information to you next week.
Thank
So you have plenty of time before the next work session.
So no pressure, but if we can get that information next week.
Yes,
we
no,
can bring
it's-
the last four at the July board.
It was almost ready.
Awesome.
Thank you for your time today.
Madam Chair, that concludes today's workshop.
Thank you. I know we're running a little over on time. Does anyone else have anything, any comments, questions? Good of the order. Mr. Nolte?
I just want to thank you, you and your team did a great job and appreciate everything. And I don't mind staying because I'd hate to have these people lose any good people that are out there to go to Orange County or somewhere, or Hillsborough County, if we can get them now.
I don't
And
think that'll happen, but
anyway, and hope you get to catch up on your sleep. Did a great job, everybody did. Thank you.
Thank you. And with no further business to come before the board, this meeting is adjourned.